We're back on camera and we're back live.
Yeah, I know it's 6 o'clock when the alarm goes off. Haven't been able to figure out how to turn off that daily alarm.
Ah, can you identify what the clock is?
The Timex
A Timex clock?
Timex clock. It's very involved and it's really good, and it plays CDs. So I'm very fond of it. But it
So I just received a solicitation from a political candidate of your persuasion, and the candidate was arguing that we are a fascist country where people indiscriminately pick up other people and deport them. And so I wanted to talk about the origins of that, and I'm sure you have your own perspective. Uh, when our country began and we laid out a constitution, it had certain ground rules, but implicit in that was that there was going to be a balance of power between the executive branch, the legislative branch, judicial branch, and over and above that, consent from the states. The Constitution, for example, would not have been ratified had not two-thirds of the states agreed to the Constitution itself. Well, we are today in the midst of significant urban turmoil as one party is protecting the people whom they believe are their constituents, who are unlikely to be American citizens, but they're protecting them from the intervention of immigration authorities, where the apparent attempt is to establish either the legitimacy of the presence of these people or their deportation. Now, this is a very ugly situation, but I would argue that it did not come about spontaneously. It came about because we've had a previous administration that elected, despite the apparent, at least substantial plurality, if not majority, of American voters who didn't want to open our border, including a predecessor Democratic president, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, uh, that we would unilaterally open our borders. And we were told by the president and Secretary Mayorkas that our border was secure. Well, indeed it wasn't. So what we are dealing with right now is a logical consequence of a failure of one party to anticipate that their actions will have an impact on the entire country and indeed on subsequent parties. There's a basic principle that I think we need to adhere to as a country. It's one of the reasons why we have the Senate ratify treaties, because an executive can't just simply go off and make a treaty. It has to be made with the understanding that Congress would have veto and endorsement power on it. So I've launched my concern. Michael, you're on the other side, and I'd like to hear your side of the story.
you remind me of some of my rich friends.
And you yourself have taken an oath of poverty, no doubt.
I try to be as rich as I can, but you remind me of some of my rich friends who, uh, some of them are racist. They don't like black people.
Okay, am I a racist?
No, I'm not saying that, but you remind me of some people who are
Yeah. Are you aware that I participated in the civil rights movement before you were born, essentially? No, maybe 13. Okay.
no, I know that when you see black people, you see human beings. You single out individuals for love or not love, but you recognize people to be individuals. and I mean, I'm talking about a couple of people, and I am fond of them. We are close, but they have these attributes, and they do look at black people, and including some of my friends, black friends, and just see an undifferentiated threat. Um, I mean, they can't believe that I will go to a gym that is, when I go there generally, mostly with a lot of black people in it, and they say I wouldn't step foot in there. I mean, they are afraid, and they have these attitudes, and and they're Trumpers, and I got a call just on the cusp of this one holiday where we had to button up and go offline and do no business for a long time. I mean, speaking of the Jewish holidays, but by the time the autumn holidays, the high holidays are done, summer is gone. You have transitioned to a new season, a new state of mind, a new type of living where uh, the days are brief and the nights are long and it's cold. Uh,
So when you were cautioning me last week that this was a time of retreat, it generally was a time of prayer and reflection for you as opposed to being in witness protection.
no witness protection, but you do as you reside in your sukkah, your booth, or Christians call it your tabernacle. Um, you spend a lot of time praying, and praying is not just praising God, but communing with God. You are expressing the kinds of feelings that you hope you have towards the King of the universe as a living God, as a living being, a superior being who is your father, your judge, and a being who decrees your fate. But you come out closer.
Okay, let me interrupt, Counsel Michael. Did you hear my opening comments as a racist diatribe because it concerned about black people crossing our border?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I thought it was, well, frankly, I thought it was loopy because I don't see the situation like that. But
I know you don't. I know you don't. Okay.
what I see is a plutocratic takeover of the Oregon's government by a bunch of not ready for prime time, brazen, um, uh, anti-American uh, people who are hungry for wealth and power, and centered around the disgraceful personality of a real a grifting showboat, narcissistic jerk.
Okay. Time out for a moment. I think we're both. I respect you as a very bright, spiritually, ethically anchored person, right? You believe that?
Thank you.
Do you reciprocate those feelings for me, or do you think I'm, as you said, loopy?
I thought your political analysis was loopy. Yeah. No, I have the no, Tommy. I have the very high regard for you.
Okay, so why would somebody that you respect and my friends, both black and Hispanic, I should add, vote for such a narcissistic guy as we have in the White House right now? What could have persuaded us to do that?
Well, a lot of anger at the Democrats and dissatisfaction, and
Because of what? Since I began my life as a Democrat, since I idolized John Kennedy, since I was in the Peace Corps, since I was part of these peace marches and civil rights marches that you referred to in your youth, and I was out there, since I was in the did all of these things, what could have persuaded somebody that'd been a Kennedy Democrat all his life to turn his back on the party of FDR and JFK. What in the world could have happened?
I often wonder, and I've tried to figure it out. I remain an FDR Democrat, and I was very happy with the Biden administration and the Obama administration and the Clinton administration. And
Even the betrayal of Israel.
well, they weren't that bad about Israel, and we live in an age where you can't single out anybody as being any leader as being particularly bad about Israel because everybody is bad about Israel. I wanted to talk earlier, and we did briefly. I wanted to talk about a New Yorker article by Ian Baruma, a brilliant man, also a brilliant man. Um, and he's going on about the origins of anti-Semitism. The whole point is anti-Semitism. And they talk about anti-Semitism as something that came out of Christianity and then later out of Islam. And and it, and that is risible. That is just ridiculous. At the time that Christianity arose, the Jews had already been exiled from their land twice. We've been driven out of Egypt. We are a people who come into the world as as people who say that your religions are childish, they're juvenile, you're barking up the wrong tree. We know better, and it has caused us endless, as you say in Hebrew and Yiddish, soros, um, to be this people who have this message that really does relegate other religions to that of the status they deserve of juvenilia. Um, so anti-Semitism is really, really old, long predates Christianity, long.
But there's a, if I interrupt just a bit, there's a paradox happening right now. And, and I have not really done a survey on this, so this is anecdotal as opposed to established fact. But among my friends, I would say those friends that identify themselves as Christian are far more likely to be supportive of Israel than my Jewish friends, en masse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and it depends on who your Jewish friends are. Um, but
They're all rich, Michael.
good for you. And young. I bet they're all young. Um, if you don't know what anti-Semitism is, and it's plain that this lead genius for the New Yorker does not, then you don't know what Semitism is. Who are the Jews? What do they stand for?
I love it. I love it. Go back, go on that one because I think we're in agreement about that.
Well, who the Jews are and what the mission of the Jews is. And the mission of the Jews is it's held steady all these. I mean, it isn't something new. It's been there, but the world largely rejects it, feels that it has something better. Um, One of the big problems with Christianity is that it tells you that that Judaism is enrolled in Christianity, and it's really the same thing. There's no real difference between Christianity and Judaism, which is nonsense. And I mean nonsense. It is folderol.
Well, in fairness to that point, don't many Christians believe, and I realize you may disagree with this, but that they represent a continuing evolution of what was once Judaism. Okay. And if you talk to a devout Islam, and you can talk to the person who doesn't wish to behead you, that too would be their argument. As as the producer of this podcast, Norman would say,
Absolutely. They're not right, but that's what they believe. I mean, they're just sure that theirs are flowerings of Judaism, and that Judaism has nothing to teach them because it's all in what they already have, which is garbage. I mean, just garbage. And but one of what we have though is the the marching orders of the Jews is to take over this little land the size of New Jersey in the western, the eastern littoral of the Mediterranean Ocean, of the Mediterranean Sea, and make it a Jewish place, turn it into an exemplary society based based on the rules of Torah, which are you know good modern hyper modern rules for living and justice. Uh,
And no, as we reminded our listeners before, part of our Constitution is a continuation of Torah.
it really is the American experiment, which I see Trump and company as demolishing, as wrecking government of the people, by the people, for the people. Um, is is very much is a flower of Torah and of the Jewish experience. I mean, you could not have the American Revolution without the revolution of Moses and Israel leaving Egypt. It's the child of it. Much more in much more direct succession than Christianity or Islam are the children of Judaism.
Well, an anchor tenet of the American experiment is that man's right emerge, a term that you've used in your writing, his rights have emerged as a consequence of a covenant with God and does not emerge from the state or from other men. It is God given. It is our birthright.
We hold these principles to be self-evident was Franklin's addition, his editorial addition to uh, Jefferson's writing. Self-evident. It's self-evident because we hold in the belief of uh, one God who is the creator of all things, and that we are all equally his children, that every human being is equally, whether they're an illegal or black or brown or yellow. Uh, Lincoln got into a lot of trouble with his Gettysburg Address. I remember seeing recently the editor of the Chicago Tribune. Just
Well, unlike me, you weren't in the audience. You didn't know.
like, well, the thing was that Lincoln was saying, and was he was channeling the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence that that all men are created equal, and the Chicagoans were saying, "Well, that's nonsense. We're not equals of any black men. You know, uh, they're not our equals. They're our inferiors. We are superior. We are another race and another type of man entirely." It's a radical. The American Revolution is deeply, deeply radical. But before that, the Hebrew Revolution was deeply, deeply radical. And it turned Egypt upside down, and it caused us endless sorrows over the generations. It's extremely democratizing, and tyrants don't like it, and they've tried to eradicate the Jews, or at least neutralize the Jews, as the communists did, ever since in every single generation. So now what we have is, this.
Time out. Just another point, though, and that is that continued through the time of the abolitionists and was articulated well by Frederick Douglass and then essentially a century later by MLK. As he said, the Declaration was a promissory note to all of us. Yeah.
Indeed. And it's a very powerful and attractive doctrine, but it's also, vociferously opposed by by its enemies. Um, but I mean, we're making progress, and we're also developing the world as we do it. If you took the Jews away from the annals of human progress, there wouldn't be a lot of human progress to record. Um, all along, the Jews have been supposed to be a catalyst people, not just of these principles of Torah, but of quantum mechanics and cybernetics and medicine and the germ theory of disease and one thing after another. The influence of the Greeks in human society is significant, but it pales. It's a dim sun in the universe compared to the bright burning sun of the Jews, and who in what in combination with the rest of the human race, the Jews are supposed to be. So you have this movement that is pitched towards this tiny little area in the east of the Mediterranean, um, a dinky land the size of Jersey, and the Jews are given the marching order to eliminate competitors, to eliminate co-claimants to that land, to not share that land, to disinherit. The word Yerusha comes up, and that this land of Israel, this Torah and this land of Israel are an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob, which is to say the Jews. Um, in that Yerusha, that word itself, from Sinai, you have the concept of disinheritance. You shall disinherit, you shall push away anybody who makes a contrary claim to be a co-owner of the land or exclusive owner of the land.
That really echoed what was going on in this country a century ago when we follow the arguments of manifest destiny. And embraced in manifest destiny was what I would say would be the implicit genocide of anybody that stood in the way of an expanding country. But, 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 but ultimately, I believe by the time you and I were born, that that had been superseded by people who were sensitive to the civil rights of others, were sensitive ultimately after the horrors of the Holocaust to the rights of aggrieved minorities. But the key message that we had until maybe 20 years ago was that the organizing myth of America, and I know you don't like that term, but the organizing, but I do recall that the organizing myth of America was one of a melting pot of disparate cultural flavors, but ultimately an adherence and a belief and a loyalty to one flag, to one country, to similar principles. I don't think we're there today. I think the melting pot has been fractured.
Well, I wanted to say that what happened to the indigenous peoples of the land was, and nobody is really indigenous. The land belongs to God, you know. And if no one has an unalloyed right to any part of the surface of the planet Earth. It's God's Earth. Um, but the Indians died like flies from disease, um, and that's just something that happened. I know there's a really good book, James McNeill, Plagues and Peoples, and he records what happens. The Jesuits, who it can be just the most impossible people and the most ghastly anti-Semitic, anti-holy movement, but a lot of Jesuit priests tried to save the Indians, and they couldn't. They protected them, they gave them work, but as the people said at the time, all a Spaniard has to do is look at an Indian, and the Indian dies. These indigenous people dies. The Europeans brought malaria to the land, the Anopheles mosquito, and made vast areas of the Amazon, for instance, uninhabitable. Um, they brought we Europeans brought disease galore, and it would have been accurate to say all a Spaniard has to do is breathe on an Indian, and the Indian dies.
Well, far more likely they had to copulate too, because a lot of Native Americans died of syphilis.
Well, syphilis and yaws are they're genetically identical, and I you would know that. Uh, but it's hard, it's hard to tell what was going on. I mean,
Anyway, we decimate people by exposing them to our viruses and others.
but it wasn't as though that was entirely deliberate. There was the British General Amherst, who didn't um, he didn't give typhoid blankets to the Indians. He sold the Indians typhoid blankets, to make a profit on killing them. There was deliberate genocide. That was part of what was going on. But um, there was an aspect of the shirt of this is fated, that these local people, so-called Indians, um, who were here, uh, lost their tenure, and in the face of um, vast numbers of people who could use the land better in many ways. I mean, we built it up, but the Indians were not engineers, um, and they didn't have the benefit of the thousands, well, more than 1,000 years of being exposed to the Jewish people and the doctrines of Torah. So they did go down, and they now are part of the melting pot. As for the melting pot, my mom would start as a Detroit school teacher, would start every day in class with the Pledge of Allegiance, and that was, she believed, and she wanted the kids to believe, and by and large the kids did buy into that American ethos.
Well, I was of the generation that was taught by teachers of your mom's generation. And every day we got up and we said the Pledge of Allegiance without apology.
And the American ethos is extremely powerful. And it includes the idea of government of laws, not men, and of of checks and balances. So right now we have Kristi Noem, the head of the inappropriate head, I think, of Homeland Security, giving an announcement for TSA, Transportation Security Administration facilities, blaming the Democrats for the government shutdown, and begging for, so this is why things are going bad. That's a violation of the Hatch Act, without question, and it's just terrible bad government for government money to go for a directly partisan purpose. But my problem with the Republicans, beloved cousin, is that I've always found them to be just outrageously brazen, and that they will do or take what they need, with very little regard for normal sensitivities. Because
And you're referring to me in that.
I'm referring to government actors. No, the fans are not necessarily. That's another thing.
Actually, I'm not a fan. There's a lot that Republicans do that I find abrasive. Yeah, I'm just I'm just trying to find my way through this. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
Um, well, we hate to lose Lincoln's last best hope for mankind uh, to a bunch of jerks who don't have a high regard for the rule of law and the miracle that is the American experiment of.
And I would say that argument is true for both sides. That there are elements in both sides that are offended by the misuse of law on behalf of private self aggrandizing interests.
Well, I hope so, but I'm seeing in younger people a willingness to lose democracy, a lack of value, a lack of appreciation of the American miracle, of the American experiment. The government,
And I would say that's a product of a democratically won educational system.
I doubt it. No, I think it's just a part of our time. I don't know what it's coming from. There is a lot of there's a lot of an enemy. There's a lot of self hate. I mean, I'm not nuts about the term self hate because you hate yourself, but people who hate their societies. I was just talking to this beautiful girl at the gym, and um, and she was saying that America is a much worse place than we're brought up to believe. And no, we're not. I mean, we look at ourselves, warts and all. That's going for truth is one thing, but exaggerating our flaws, um, and saying that America is just another place. It'd be like saying that Judaism is just another religion when you have facts that indicate that it's no such thing. That you really do have something in the course in Judaism and in the American Revolution. You have a new order for the ages. Franklin and the founding fathers were right about that. This is something new, and it's something to cherish. Um, and to not get this is like insulting God. Um, you commune with God and you try to come to, see things His way, um, but um, you don't just decide that all this is garbage and that He doesn't exist or that He's a bad God or that the country is a bad country because there are things that are questionable or even purely awful things. Uh, we've got a lot of awful history in our country. I mean, with Civil War, um, human bondage, all the things that we wrestled through. But like Martin Luther King says, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And one of the reasons it bends towards justice is because of the influence of Torah and the Jews in the world to bring it that way, to constantly snap it around in that direction, which causes, vast animosity and, incredible hostility by all the tyrants.
I One of the elements in John Kennedy's inaugural address was material that I believe his writer, I think it was Ted Sorensen, who actually helped write the speech.
Salinger, was it?
No, was it Salinger? No, it was Ted Sorensen, not Pierre Salinger. Salinger was press secretary. But
It was Salinger. You're right. It was Salinger as his chief writer.
that's Ted Sorensen. Salinger was the press, was it? Whatever it was. Never mind.
Now, now it was the Jewish guy, not the Swedish.
It was a Jewish guy did it. Okay, all right. But they pirated John Donne. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, but the ask not comment was addressed to an audience that I believe, for the most part, when we were in school, were imbued with the responsibilities, what the Greeks would call civitas, citizenship. We looked upon being a citizen as something that we took seriously, responsibly. We had to be educated about it. We had to know about the Constitution. We had to get a sense of our ability to sacrifice in behalf of the greater good. I don't think that exists now.
Well, part of it is our time. I mean, we grew up in the shadow of World War II, and America.
Oh, I know that, but I thought that was a good thing in terms of our loyalty to the country.
Well, and we knew that we were going to have obligations as the young men and women who were going to take this nation forward. And I mean, we were as imbued with the American ethos as the young British were at the turn of the last century. They knew they were going to grow up to rule an empire, and and we and we had that awareness ourselves. I mean, and you did, and we did go off and represented America in the world, and it was part of the job. That's when we were born. You know, other kids later came into a multivalent world of when America was not such a predominant power, not the indispensable power, but more just another one. So that's one change. But I think we lost faith in the God of our fathers and the gods of our fathers, really, and in the ethos, and a lot of it wasn't Democrats or Republicans. It was thinking people who were pondering, what have we done? Who are we? And it was not a bad thing for people to look at the bad parts of American history. I mean, was it demoralizing? Yeah, maybe, but the truth has its own agenda. Uh,
Well, I think if we learn from that and decide that that negative model is not something we wish to echo, I think also I did, and I think you did to some degree as well. We grew up in a society when I was, barely born that was still been mobilized to deal with the ravages of the Great Depression, where the government had to do something to intervene in behalf of people. And, people like Amity Shays may dispute it, but Roosevelt didn't have many choices other than to mobilize the entire economy in behalf of salvaging the working person in America and ultimately salvaging the country in World War II. And so we emerged from that, certainly in the late 40s and the 50s, relatively unified, with the exception that we ignored the whole civil rights problem well into the 1960s. And then I think we squandered our credibility on God knows how many useless wars. So there developed an incredible cynicism about what government was directing people to do.
Let me tell you about the Rostow brothers, who did more than anybody else to get us into the Vietnam War. Um, One was an economist who'd studied the history of capitalism in the new century, um, and and the other was a political leader. The Rostows, a couple of Jewish guys who really, really believed in America. They believed in capitalism, and the economist. I think there was Walt and Eugene. I get them confused, but I think it was Walt.
Weren't they presidential advisors?
They were, and I think it was for Kennedy and LBJ, and um, they came up with the statistic that was always bandied about in my econ classes in college, that if you can just keep a developing economy from falling to war or a communist revolution, you can get just extraordinary growth rates of 6, 7, 8, 10% a year, economic growth rates. And in a generation and a half, no more, you can turn an undeveloped economy, an undeveloped culture, into a highly developed um, contributor to the nations.
Well, just look what we did to Vietnam.
Well, that was the thing was we were going to save Vietnam from a communist revolution, even if it killed it, and that's
Now the Vietnamese are competing with us.
and they are, yeah, but that I mean that's the power of capitalism, you know. Despite a communist revolution, it chugged along. They all looked at the czarist economy. And the czarist economy just grew like topsy. It was growing at like these exaggerated growth rates because you're able to take things that have already been invented and plug them into your economy, and you don't have to go through some of the stages of capitalism. You can just pick things right up and innovate, and you get terrific growth rates. But we were going to save Vietnam, and um, and despite their communist revolution and despite their war, and their war went on almost as long as the Jews' war against the Syrian Greeks, the Maccabean War. That's our next big holiday coming up in a few months, where the whole Syrian Greek Empire left by Alexander um, just tried to destroy the Jews with, tried to eliminate the Jewish religion. This is before all the anti-Semitism, that the New Yorker is talking about. That was supposedly, this is hundreds and hundreds of years before there was ever anybody named Jeebus around. Um, but um, they were going to, achieve this. They were going to save them, and we put in $1 trillion and scores of thousands of American lives, and we killed Vietnamese wholesale, and it was a big mistake. It was premature messianism on the part of secular Jews who led this. They pulled political levers, and they did all kinds of things to make sure that we did not let down our Vietnamese brothers who didn't know that they were our brothers, and that we were going to kill them in order to save them. It was really nuts, but
But as a child of those times and seeing my friends and ultimately me being at risk of going out to Vietnam, we saw through that cynicism. I mean, that there's just the reason there's so much outrage is people were in the streets asking, "What is the point? Why all this bloodshed? What the hell are we doing?"
but it was grounded in this Jewish idealism. These two extremely idealistic guys, these Rostow brothers, who just really wanted to save Vietnam from itself and to keep them from falling to a communist revolution so that they could all come to kumbaya with a highly developed economy, which they ended up getting to anyway, you know.
So, to what degree was as Eisenhower warned, because he foresaw this, was the military and industrial complex co-conspirators in wanting this to happen?
Well, it worked for them because it allowed the enlargement of the army. It allowed the enlargement of people's responsibilities. People could become more important. Um, and the fact is, when you have an enormous military force, there's incredible temptation to use it. And we did. And it was 21 years after the end of World War II. I mean, and if you look at our military adventures in history, I mean, it's so obvious, it's so painfully obvious that we are, highly developed apes. We are one of the species of apes, and every 21 years we go off to war, because the last generation that remembered how awful it all was is no longer fully in the field. So we did. And 21 years after Vietnam, we went to war in Iraq for no particular reason. Allow me to remind you which party arranged that.
You know, no, no, there are idiots on both sides, I assure you.
There surely are, yes. Yeah. But I remain an American revolutionary, a Jewish revolutionary, and an FDR Democrat. And I really do regard that as the way to um, make things make things work. Um, of
I think we can be in dialogue with each other. I think ultimately you and I,
course, well, good God, I mean, I'm in dialogue with my crazy friends, and
now you're in dialogue with your crazy cousin. So
one of my I thought your analysis of the political situation was like I used the word loopy. I mean, if I have to apologize for that, I will.
no, you don't. No, I get it. I've been called worse.
It's not mine. I see a struggle of plutocracy, of people who don't want to pay taxes and don't think they should pay any more taxes against the rights of ordinary people. One of the things about this Hebrew Revolution,
Michael, I want to go back to a point though. I certainly don't consider myself a plutocrat. I'm not a tax avoider. I do hate to see money wasted on bullshit, and that does make me angry. And I was just remarking to someone, oh, yes, I got this epistle from Medicare yesterday that apparently after January, those of us that are doing telemedicine will no longer be able to do that without proper justification. So I've got all these people in rural areas, people who are impoverished, people who have to take buses and may themselves be handicapped and are dependent on these little iPhones or Android phones to communicate with, and we have to jump more hurdles to allow that to happen. And I was commenting to a friend of mine, I said, you know, redundant, a friend, I said, there's no such word as bureaucracy. It always has to be preceded by the adjective unthinking. I mean, who thinks up this stuff? Is there a ceiling for the IQ of politicians and bureaucrats that you should not go beyond in order to pass these regulations and mandates? They're insane.
well, you get insufferable lack of empathy. I mean, like a perverse lack of empathy and a lack of foresight and unintended consequences. But let me put it this way: the purpose of government is beyond anything else to protect private property. That's what it's there for. So you can make your money, and you're not going to be besieged by hordes of Chinese communists or mobs of homeless or anyone like that. You can.
So you don't seek additional purposes to preserve life and justice.
Well, that's within the ambit of preserve private property because that's the main thing, and the rest comes with that.
Michael, I gotta really dispute that. I think that's a really cynical view. I mean, that is the 1619 project writ large. Everything is property.
Well, your home, your household, what your food, I mean those things. That's all property. The thing is that given that role of private property and the role of government in protecting it, it is incumbent on those who have the most property to protect pay the most. They need to pay proportionally. So you get, in our time, people saying that you don't know how much I pay in taxes. I pay, like far more than you, a man of moderate wealth or income I just pay ridiculous taxes, and it's unfair, 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 and it's not. Those who have disproportionate quantities of wealth, the property to be protected, should be paying more, and disproportionately, because they're getting the benefit of government. And there's always this tendency to forget that, and for people to not want to pay what they think is exorbitant taxes.
Okay, I personally don't object to that. I like the idea that I'm fortunate enough to be able to pay taxes. I want it to be fairly assigned, and I don't want to pay for waste. And I also think, hear me out on this, that we need to prepare people from the time they're children to the point that they're adults to meet the expectations of taking on the responsibility as much as possible of self-sufficiency, citizenship, the capacity to give back to the greater culture. I've never objected to making contributions to this country. I'm huge at volunteering for that stuff. And both of us, I imagine, spend a fair part of our time offering service to people, not necessarily with remuneration, just because that's what we feel is our mission.
That's who we are. That's who we are. That's what the Jews do. You try to bring heaven to earth. You try to you try to bring justice and goodness, what is square and straight, to earth. You don't write to.
But it does offend me when I see people that presume that they are going to be supported because they just want to be supported without regard to any effort to support themselves. That bothers me. It bothers me terribly that we have now probably at least 3 or 4 generations of people raised in our school systems that probably don't know crap about the foundation of this country or know sufficient disciplines with which to support themselves economically. And somehow expect that the country is going to be able to support them, that they have now I understand you're going to dispute this as I argue it, a right to welfare. I think, oh,
No, I'm not disputing it. No, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
so we got to do something to bring us around. And I don't object to paying taxes. I just don't want my taxes wasted on bullshit.
Well, there is an obligation. It's a Noahide law proposition. It's one of the seven universal laws, dinim, to establish systems of government. You, without government, people will eat each other alive. You have no security for private property. So this is one of. It's not a Ten Commandment commandment. It's a seven commandment, which is absolutely universal. You have to have. You can't have Lord of the Flies kind of government. You have to have actual fair government. You've got to work for it. It will absorb people's lives, and it's a good, very worthy goal to have. But I would say, and this is going to inflame you, sorry, but the Republicans' war against U.S. public education has been very successful.
I would counter that with asking you if the advocacy of the various teachers union, Randy Weingarten in particular, are they advocating in behalf of their mission to educate students, or are they advocating as a labor force in behalf of salaries and benefits for teachers?
Well, I think it's both. You can't have decent teachers if they're sleeping in yeah.
No, no, I think they're missed out on their mission though, because what's coming out of our school system right now? I would argue that, and this really sounds, forgive me if I sound like an old man, but I think The education that I was provided in a very mediocre school system is far better than what kids are getting today. I at least was able to master mathematics, English, reading. I emerged with the capacity to advance in other studies, and I was prepared to serve my country and serve my fellow man by that education. I don't think I don't think we can assume that kids are getting that right now.
I'm afraid we can't. I've talked with different teachers. I remember an English teacher who was at my old one of my old high schools, um, and I mentioned Kafka to him, and he'd never heard of Kafka. Uh,
Well, that's a key point. That is, we have teachers who themselves are not educated. That's frightening.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's frightening, but there's not that much money there for it. And but again, it's been part of the Republican ethos to uh, starve the public schools. And I mean, they want parochial education. They want God in schools. There's a really great
Could I? It's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think I would agree that the current Doge mission is to look upon federal government enterprises, absence defense, as something that should be deferred to the states. And I don't think they're anti-education, but I do think there's a fair amount of waste in the federal government, and we need to address that. But I think that that's where the tension is right now.
well, it isn't just the federal government. I mean, the schools are funded by the states mostly, almost entirely. And it's at the state level that you have the starvation of the public schools.
So tell me about your own state. I believe it's Michigan, is it not? Did you not grow up in the same town I grew up in?
What kind of cross examination is that?
I'm a forensic psychiatrist, man. I mean, what did you expect me to do?
Yes, it's Michigan. Right.
Okay. And and how is your educational system run by Democrats? I should remind you.
Well, no. I mean, the Republicans are the ones who pay most of the taxes. The rich,
I know, but how is your educational system run by Democrats? You do have, as I recall, you have a Democratic governor, right?
we have a Democratic governor, but they're
And is your mayor a Democrat? Okay.
well, except this, it's the state standards that we're talking about, and every jurisdiction sets its own, um, school levies. So you have in Lake Orion, Michigan. I was just talking to a fellow who's moved out of Detroit, is raising his kids in Lake Orion, Michigan, where the schools are really good, pretty good, you know, um, and and they tax the hell out of themselves. It's all property taxes, you know, and it's almost it's not all white because a lot of the kids are Indian and a lot of the kids that is to say East Indian and a lot of the kids are Asian, um, but they're not a lot of black kids. And yeah, oh yeah. No, I mean Jim Crow isn't what it was, and Michigan was never a Jim Crow place. It was highly segregated, but I mean this is all school funding, and what will people, how much money will people put in when they want, religious Jews send their kids to religious schools, and where they do not get the greatest education in the world. A lot of kids come out unable to read and to write in English, um, but they don't want to pay both school taxes and private school tuition, and that's a terrible burden. So they're looking for fairness, but their fairness is something that denudes the public schools of what it needs to proceed. Down in the South, you have the SEG academies, where you have the white people who are not going to send their kids to the Birmingham, Alabama public schools, and they have the whole shadow educational system called, SEG academies, segregation academies, where they have a few black kids as tokens. One of a fan of Rainbow Covenant was going on about. He's a principal of the school in Beaufort. He was in Beaufort, South Carolina, and he was going on about the way the same black kids appear in all the pictures in the school, of the students. Again, little Jeremy, pops up again and again and again and again because they have to have a black face. But they are almost all white schools, and they have, the system. And I don't know that, you get two systems, and is anybody teaching reading, and is anybody teaching maths and sciences, and because of our American dilemma, of racism and in class issues, we don't have the kinds of schools that we used to have, and I don't know who reads, and I mean, people are. It some of this is new technologies too. I mean, reading is less attractive than pictures in a lot of ways. You have people are going to watch this podcast. We're not writing essays. We're trying to reach people where they are, and they're not reading War and Peace anymore. They're taking in their information in a different way. I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's certainly different.
So this is a reminder that those of you who'd like to reach us, we do have ways to reach us, and I believe, Norman, you can post our email. So if you'd like to have Michael do a reading of Tolstoy's War and Peace at our next episode, maybe your book, I love. Uh, I would have to acknowledge that Tolstoy's War and Peace wanders a bit for me. Yeah,
It does. But yeah, real problem with War and Peace. Yeah.
I love the brothers though. Brothers Karamazov, I loved. They was incredibly.
Oh, does that go on and on and on? Yeah, I have a copy of it handy. I was getting into the Grand Inquisitor. Is
Oh, incredible. Yeah,
Yes, and he's got Jesus as his prisoner. You know, and how is this going to go? And very elaborate arguments.
yeah. Go back to where you came from. We don't need you here.
Well, Dostoevsky was a horrible anti-Semite. I mean,
Yeah, but the book was bitchin'. It was a good book.
a bitchin' book. Yeah, that's right. I'll give you that.
Yeah. I found Crime and Punishment deadly, but the brothers, well, all the characters that enriched the pages of the brothers, that was an incredible story.
Yeah, yeah, it really was. Can you imagine anybody today reading it? I mean, yeah, who? Graduate students in Russian literature. I I don't know. I was at an estate sale, and it was this kind of daring, um, louche kind of fellow who had these leather shops, noir leather, and he left behind all these magazines, and they had these lurid covers and just terrific, really dramatic, colorful covers with lots and lots of pulchritude and on the covers, and then you look inside, and there are these dense texts that no one will read those things, but we all did. we read that stuff all the time. We were, like, compulsive readers, and so that's different. Um, I don't know if American democracy is going to survive what we've got. It's certainly a worthwhile thing. It's something that we want to preserve, um, and and it, and, it, and, and it's holy. I mean, there is an aspect, a strong aspect of holiness in it that every person made in the image of God. It's the only system that reflects that.
The wonderful quote from Ben Franklin: "What have you given us, Mr. Franklin? A republic, if you can keep it." Right? Love it. Well, as an old film buff, I am marveling by the career of Yul Brynner, who morphed himself from the Emperor of Siam on Broadway, where he starred absent Gertrude Lawrence, and was, by the way, a magnificent dancer. Then Deborah Kerr in the film version of The King and I, and then morphed into, I believe it was Andre or Dimitri in The Brothers. He starred in The Brothers Karamazov, and then became the leader of the Magnificent Seven, which was actually based on the Kurosawa, The Seven Samurai. So there's a guy who really got himself around.
I was just going on about Humphrey Bogart and with Lauren Bacall or Betty Persky. She was the first cousin of Shimon Peres, the, the prime minister of Israel. Yeah, Perez, Persky. She was,
So Lauren Bacall was Jewish. Yeah. As was Hedy Lamarr, who was really apparently a brilliant person.
and really, really beautiful. But they both were almost supernaturally beautiful. I saw a picture of Bogey and Lauren Bacall, and Lauren Bacall looks like a goddess, you know, appearing next to Bogey. But I remember the line in The Big Sleep where they came together, and there's the general's two daughters, the sisters, and one was Lauren Bacall, and the other I forget who she was, but she stole every scene she was in, which weren't many. And she comes on to Bogey, and she sizes him up. You're not very tall, and, and he goes, "Well, I try to be."
I love it. Okay. Well, Michael, I do appreciate our dialogue. I hope our listeners would appreciate the differences in our perspective and they come from good conscience. What does the next week hold for you, my friend?
Well, we get into the month of Mar Cheshvan, which is bitter Cheshvan. I can't remember what Cheshvan means, but it's bitter supposedly because there aren't any holidays. But after all the holidays, it's not a bitter matter. You feel so free, and at last we don't have all you don't have to take all your meals outside your house in a sukkah. You're not fasting for 25 hours. You're not carrying on with dancing, and you can finally get back to like normal life. So, um, so I'm hoping to be very productive and write great things. And anytime you want me for another, I'm here.
Oh, I'll catch you next week. I mean, it is just a delight always to catch up with you. And I, uh, I'm going to make it back to my hometown at some point, and maybe we can do a podcast. We can do a podcast from your studio together.
Ready, ready to, all right, ready to do it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, looking forward. Thank you.